We all like looking back, don't we, when you think about it? Nostalgia's a big thing. Not for us, of course, we're still living in the dream. Absolutely. Doesn't matter what decade you are, you look back at it with great affection. And seemingly you airbrush out the negatives, the bad bits, whether it be, say, like in the 1970s, to remember decimalisation. Who remembers that over here in the United Kingdom? Yes, the 4-day week, the candles, the no electricity. That was during the Edward Heath administration, if you remember that. But of course, there were other bigger things that we often look back at, and it's the music that really captures our imagination. If, like me, chums, you flick on the radio and you hear a record, suddenly you're transported back, to the point when your jeans weren't the Orson Welles sized jeans, you know what I mean? And the other side of it is you come away thinking, I remember that moment very well. And suddenly, you know where you were, who you were with, what you were doing, even what job you had. I don't know if you found this, but recently I was looking through some old things and I found a very early wage slip. It wasn't written on a scroll for you people basically saying how old I am, but it was of a certain time. And it's funny, isn't it, when you look at stuff like that now, that would be a totally different thing. Because as we know, we now get paid, really, everything's by bank, but it's the memories that triggered it off. As I said, I was listening to the radio the other day, and this wonderful song by a brilliant artist who I was lucky enough to meet, albeit very briefly, came on the radio. And I wanted to share this memory with you. As ever, I hope you don't mind. Hi, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining me today in this beautiful splendour. Isn't this garden nice, don't you think? It's not mine, of course. I could You imagine the upkeep of somewhere like this. It's beautiful, in fact. It's a big hotel garden here in the gorgeous medieval city of York in North Yorkshire, and they do a terrific job tending to them, making them look good. So, nothing is there when you look around, you think it's all for our pleasure. That's the nice thing. It's a bit like this particular lady who gave us so much music for pleasure, the one and only Dusty Springfield. Dusty was an icon for many different people. In fact, I've been lucky enough to interview many people who worked with Dusty, the likes, of course, of Tom Jones, Engelbert Humperdinck. She was the sort of guest star that everybody loved. Now, when you think of Dusty's songs, you instantly think of the classics like I Only Want to Be With You, Losing You, and of course the later collaborations with the wonderful 80s synth band, the Pet Shop Boys. Now, I was lucky enough to briefly meet Dusty, all thanks to the, disco impresario, remember him, Peter Stringfellow. Now, Stringfellow had many big clubs, as you know, around the world, and the biggest really was the Hippodrome in Leicester Square, London. An original Frank Matcham theatre turned into the word discotheque, remember that, in the 80s? You wouldn't use that phrase now, would you? And what was lovely about this particular sort of story is he'd had a record label which he'd signed Dusty Springfield to. And what was interesting again was, obviously this was a different time. Nowadays this would be all streaming, it wouldn't be difficult, and everything would be easy to manage. Dusty had been out of kink for a while, hadn't had a few hits, all of that sort of stuff. Suddenly, she signed to Peter Stringfellow's label and there were big things promised. It didn't exactly work out like that. Now, it's interesting when you're young, isn't it? Somebody said to me, would you like a picture with Dusty? And when you're young and you say the wrong thing, because you think, Dusty, isn't she from the 60s? And you just think you're hip and trendy and everything like that. Well, what a lady. She was very nice, very polite, all that sort of stuff. But I didn't realise that obviously she's a very, very shy lady behind the scenes. And what was interesting about Dusty was that she'd been asked to do many different collaborations throughout her career. And as I said, the Pet Shop Boys really catapulted her back towards the end of her career with tracks like Nothing Has Been Proved and What Have I Done to Deserve This, and the brilliant In Private. But she really wanted to duet with none other. And when you think about it, was there anybody bigger, better, or indeed symbolising the world of music in the American music market, the king of rock and roll, Elvis? Now, apparently they'd had conversations, or managers had had conversations, and Elvis was very keen. Now, remember, Dusty'd actually teamed up with another 60s icon, her rival, some people might say, of that particular era, Cilla Black. Cilla had many hits herself, including, of course, the #1 smash, Anyone Who Had a Heart. They teamed up for the track Heart and Soul. Obviously, it wasn't the mega hit that people had hoped for, but Dusty, according to this source, and Peter Stringfellow himself, always held out that one day she may have had the opportunity. Sadly, as everybody knows, we lost Elvis way too early at a very early age of 42. and Dusty Springfield equally way too early. But what they left behind was two terrific great voices and a memory of music that we'll never forget. And I was lucky enough at least to meet one of them. Neil Sean in the very heart of